I believe that there's a better strategy, and I call it a New Year's vision. And the New Year's vision is a little bit different because it is a dreamy kind of goal, but the thing that makes it more tangible is that there are 5 things that must be done on a consistent basis to make that vision real. So it's, what is it that I want to do, be, accomplish, and what are the 5 things that I need to do to make that real? Those 5 things done every single day, week, whatever it is, once they're done consistently, objective things that I can measure, tangible things, if I do those things, then that vision will be true. And I think that's a better approach to this. This is the podcast that flips the health and wellness industry upside down so you can be your healthiest inside and out. I'm your host, Dr. Neal Smoller, holistic pharmacist and supplement strategist. I'm once again by myself. Mr. Mark DeSico unfortunately got sick with COVID, and it really whooped his butt, probably because of his inferior genetics, of course. He's dealing with the aftermath, going on a little temporary hiatus. We'll miss you, Marky. Get better, my dude. Today's episode, New Year's, you say you want a resolution. Now, Mark's not here to make fun of my title, so I get to say cornier and courtier titles without any guilt, which is great. In my Holistic Standard, this episode will be a wellness pyramid and a 1, 2, 3 vitality discussion. We're specifically talking about mental well-being and implementing change that lasts. But I'm not really by myself today. In the studio, I have a fan favorite, psychologist, Dr. Lawrence Dresdale. He's a practicing psychologist. He's here to help with this conversation. Hi, Dr. Dresdale.
Good morning.
Good morning. So visit wellnessupsidedown.com for all things podcast related. Please subscribe to this show on your favorite podcast app or even over on YouTube, and definitely give the show a 5-star review as often as you can. Each and every episode, it helps us get seen and heard, and I think it's worth it. As you can tell, I'm suffering for post-holiday respiratory stuff too. I've got a raspier voice than normal. I'm going to try not to be gurgly, I promise. I don't want you to be grossed out by what we're doing here. So I apologize in advance if I sound weirder than normal. So let's do the pre-show affirmation. Why am I here? What am I trying to do? What do you need to know if you're tuning in to me for the very first time? I want you to live your healthiest life. I'm a big fan of supplements when done right. I just don't want you to get lost in the chaos that health and wellness industries intentionally create. And I'm here to make sure you don't waste your time, your money, or your energy on the false promises made by billion-dollar industries. So I'm here to help you on a new and better wellness path. But as a warning, if I get ranty about anything health and wellness related, I'm not picking on you because you tried it, but I'm beating up on the system, the misinformation, and the hype that gets good folks like you into the wrong situations. I'm raging against the machine and not you. So back to the episode today, New Year's resolutions. The main takeaway from today, I want you to hear, how do you set goals without getting attached to the outcome and why that's so important? So we have 3 major topics we're going to talk about: chicken or the egg, so the motivation in the new year. Second, we're going to talk about resolutions. They're a bad idea. Instead, we're going to have you set a New Year's vision. And then I'm going to talk about my personal New Year's vision. I'm going to tell you how much of a mess I am. So that's what we're going to do. So we'll introduce Dr. Dresdale to you guys. If you haven't heard our mental well-being episodes, I believe they were episodes 8 and 9. They were freaking awesome. You should check them out. Dr. Dresdale is a clinical psychologist with extensive experience in the field of behavioral medicine. He combined biopsychology and clinical psychology in his graduate work to integrate the knowledge of biological bases of behavior, including brain-behavior relationships, into clinical practice. Dr. Dresdale was an intern and resident in the Department of Medical Psychology at the Oregon Health and Science University, where he received training in neuropsychology. He's in private practice, with the primary treatment modality being mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, MBCT, to address a broad range of clinical issues, including traumatic brain injury. That's pretty sweet. It makes you sound smarter than you are, I think.
It does sound good. I'm sitting over here. I feel pretty impressed.
Yeah, you're like, who's that guy? That guy sounds awesome.
Who wrote that?
Happy New Year.
Well, thank you. Happy New Year to you and your family.
How was your holiday? Was it good?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
I have 2 strongly held beliefs, and tell me if you back me up on this. So I'm going to be talking to any elected official that will hear me, and they're not going to hear me for sure. But the last 2 weeks of the year should be a federal holiday.
Here, here.
We might not even try to pretend. Like, it's so stupid. You can't get anything done. Everybody, no matter what, even if like the business is open, everybody's on vacation. Everybody's checked out. And I like mentally, everybody's just out of it. So I just feel like let's just call the last 2 weeks a waste. And I'll take it one step further. The second thing I want to say is that the last week between Christmas and New Year's, you should just turn into a piece of furniture. You should do so little, as little as possible, and just become like a sludge on the couch watching like Lord of the Rings, the extended versions. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I support that, because in my world, the last 2 weeks of December become living hell because people are dealing with holidays, stress, anxiety, money, and most importantly, their family.
Yeah.
And I get phone calls and crises left and right. So my world's a little different.
It's funny because we've been talking through the holiday season here about how the wellness push this time of year is about stress. And I've noticed it in my own life, how stressful the prepping for a party became. And I'm listening to my peers, and it's really upsetting to me. It's an upsetting time. I get having to see your family that like abused you like in some way, like a little bit or a lot, or like having to deal with that uncle, like that kind of stuff. But the stress around buying gifts for people and the stress around throwing a party, that to me, I just can't understand. I just can't wrap my head around it.
Well, there's an enormous paradox between the fantasy of the reality. Life is not a Norman Rockwell Christmas painting.
Yeah.
With everybody sitting around the table, smiling and happy and all of those great things.
Yep.
And there's a huge amount of pressure, particularly in our culture, in the American society, to live up to some totally unrealistic standard that people press themselves to achieve, increase the pressure on themselves to give the right gift to everybody, spend a lot more money than they really have available. And I have to tell you, I hear people say every year, next year I'm going to make presents out of popsicle sticks for everybody. I'm not going by. And then I see them next year, and it's like they got hands full of presents. And,
right.
Well, I had to get this, and I had to get that. So we really do lose track of what the original point of a lot of these holidays were because they've been so commercialized.
Right. Charlie Brown has been saying it since the 40s.
Hello, right? We all believe it, but nobody will go out on strike about the holidays.
As you can tell, my stressor this time of the year is my attachment to last year and the idea that the holiday is over, right? Like that's the stressor for me. We're going to talk about this attachment that we kind of have in a lot of different areas. But first, I want to talk about motivation. So I call it chicken or the egg. And so basically, I look around at people this time of year after the holidays, and I ask myself, which came first? Our desire to get back on the rails after the holiday season, or the marketing engine that sells you the products and services disguised as some magical fix that you absolutely need. And if you don't use it the way that they tell you, you're going to fail, and then you should feel bad. And we've discussed how there's the different pushes throughout the year, right? The wellness industry has like cough and cold in the fall and stress around the holidays. New Year's resolutions is the one, right? It's driving the narrative to some extent for a lot of people. And I have to ask a lot of folks, like, are you jonesing for a fix now because you want it or because that's what's supposed to happen? Everyone in your content bubble's talking about it. Everybody in your social feed is doing it. Do you really want this change right now? Or is this like a little bit of a Pavlovian reflex for people? What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. As you were saying that, I was thinking about how New Year's Eve, okay, great, it's December 31st and tomorrow is January 1st, and we've got this arbitrary day, we all carry on around it and so forth. But every day is New Year's Eve. It's the beginning of the next year. But yeah, this concept of New Year's resolutions, okay, we're going to turn the page and we're going to be completely different human beings in the next year. Not so much.
Right.
Because why? Not that there's anything wrong with us per se. It's just that this is the way that we work as human beings, which is we get an idea, okay, this year I'm going to fill in the blank, and we get excited about it. And we start off like, the first couple of days, we're really on it. Fades a little bit over the next couple of days, and like 2 weeks later, just an example, as I remember when I used to go to a gym pre-COVID, the people at the desk would say, oh yeah, we got all these sign-ups, the January 1st. We're not going to see them in the gym on, in February and March because they're all just going to fall off. So that's just how we work. So it's not a bad idea to make a commitment to ourselves for positive change, but we have to do it in a way that's realistic and actually works instead of like, okay, I'm going to be a completely different human being right now.
Right. I'm going to flip the switch and this is it. And the problem for me is like, the industry makes it sound like that's what's going to happen. And they're tapping into a couple different things here. Like everyone's promoting exercise plans or weight loss supplements, nutritional consults, apps now. And the industry's just making boatloads of money. Gyms expect not just like a 10% increase, a 45% increase, which is insane in monthly sales. And most people subscribe to those things and never get off of it. Supplements, a lot of these weight loss, I call these supplements this time of the year the repentance supplements, like the weight loss and detox and all of that kind of stuff. I feel like, most people will take those, but they won't really take them for a long period of time. But then there's also this other group of people that say, a new year, new me, and they start taking a bunch of supplements that are going to, quote unquote, make them healthy without that supplement strategy that I talk about all the time. And that's what the industry loves. That's like signing up for a gym membership and never going because you're just buying those things every month and they're not actually doing anything for you. It gets so crazy. I don't know if you've heard this. Like FDA, FTC, they regulate supplements and the claims that are made. And
so they say.
And that's exactly the point. They're like sleeping giants if they ever do anything. And if you do something wrong, as we pointed out in the podcast before, it's like a slap on the wrist. It's not really like they just write you a sternly written letter, like that's it. And it costs you money to have them come on site and beat you up a little bit. But otherwise, you can go to business as usual. They actually said last year, I couldn't believe this. They said, you have to be on the lookout because it's really bad now how they're doing this. They said people are using deceptive tactics to promote weight loss products. But that wasn't very surprising, and that doesn't really mean much. What was surprising to me was how they really nailed it. And this kind of goes to that extrinsic motivation, the outside motivation that we're getting here. They highlighted three things that are going on that we're falling for. So these companies are hiring well-known Instagram influencers to endorse products without disclosing that they were paid to do so. They're using fake websites and news reports to promote bogus products, and they're including images of doctors and ads to make them more believable. And those aren't my words. Those are the words of the boring, inactive FDA and FTC. And so that's wild to me that like they're so alert that they're actually saying something so realistic. And so to me, that just shows you how much people use these things and how big of a problem it actually is. And it's because it's a gimmick, right? We suck at, intrinsically, we want to make this change, but we suck at long-term planning, right? And we respond far better to emergency situations. And that's kind of what I'm going through, fight or flight. I just worked really hard to get as gross as I am right now over the past 30 days. And so now I'm in an emergency situation and I have to act. And so we go for these shorter term kind of like urges in our motivation. And then we go towards these shorter term solutions, these gimmicks. So let's talk about the gimmicks that come up here and kind of like, we all know that they're gimmicks, right? Like we know that these supplements and these weight loss programs and the marketing is just a gimmick to get us to do something. Why do we keep going for it year after year after year? So the FDA actually has to say something this year,
Yeah, it'd be nice if they actually did something. But when it comes to psychology, the psychology of marketers and advertisers make me look like a total amateur.
Right.
I mean, they're motivating the behavior of millions upon millions of people because it's driven by one goal and one goal only. And there's no necessarily ethics or morality or values involved, which is to make money.
Right.
End of story.
Period.
And, their justification is, well, it's not against the law.
Right.
Or maybe sometimes it is, but who cares? But in terms of the supplement market, and the point you made, Neal, is a really important one. when it comes to changing ourselves, which is it's the amount of effort required to change.
Yeah.
So the truth of the matter is, if I'm sitting around and I'm overweight and I think, well, I'd really have to make effort. I'd have to change all these elements of my lifestyle, right? What I eat, how I eat, exercise, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, wait a minute. Look, if I take that, man, I'm just going to the fat's going to melt off of me.
Right.
And I'm going to achieve my goal with no more effort than swallowing.
Right.
And so even if I think my brain is smart and goes, oh, don't fall for that. That's just a bunch of BS. What most advertising and marketing is geared toward is the emotions.
Right.
So they understand, people will think this, but they want that.
Right.
And so we're just going to go for what they want.
Right.
And it'll work.
Right.
Right. And so the product doesn't have to work if you can keep selling it to new people over and over and over and over again. Right?
It's actually kind of funny that you say that, because I believe that these supplements, these repentant supplements, are Ponzi schemes. Now, I am addicted to American Greed with Stacy Keach, American Greed. And I'm like, I could probably be one of these people on here. I just wouldn't spend all the money on stupid cars, but I could convince people to give me all of their stuff, right?
Sure.
These guys don't seem very smart at all. And the people falling for it, I go how could you fall for something like this? But it's a very common thread, which is a Ponzi scheme directly, or something that is very similar to a Ponzi scheme in almost all of them. And it seems, just from my perspective of watching this over 16 seasons, that the Ponzi scheme elements are increasing. And so I've got a couple thoughts about that. So the reason that I believe that Ponzi schemes are so effective, and they worked at the beginning and they work now, is because it's the opposite of what we're talking about. Long-term is what, of course, to make money, it takes effort and a long amount of time and a lot of struggle, right? But if I can give somebody money and then before I could even expect it, I get a good return back, oh yeah, I trust, and I'm going to keep doing that because I'm getting results sooner than I thought I would, right? And so I believe that with our more modern, society and psychology hacks that are being implemented in our marketing, in our devices, in our daily experience, we're getting more and more addicted to that short-term feedback, right? And so we're falling for Ponzi schemes more and more and more because people are just exploiting that, right?
Well, reward maintains behavior. It's pretty simple.
Very simple, right? It's just that stupid little do-do-do like the rats would do. But, the idea of a supplement and losing weight taking years, to really lose weight and keep it off. But then you can take this stimulant, and your appetite is suppressed and your metabolism is revved up, or, you want to cleanse and you're going to poop. So it feels like you're cleansing. And then they put stuff in those cleanse products that actually solidify and turn into shapes of your intestines.
Oh,
so it looks like you're actually cleaning out the bubble gum that's stuck under your desk.
Oh, seriously?
So it looks like it. So you're getting that instant feedback, and you're just falling for a different type of Ponzi scheme. And that's what's going on here, right? And so I'll tell folks that are well, my friend's getting that instant, my friend is investing in the Ponzi scheme of this supplement. Can I invest in this Ponzi scheme too? And I said, well, listen, there's something I could give you right now that would work very well for appetite suppression and metabolism revving up. And it's natural. It's called cocaine. And guess what? Not only you're going to have all that weight benefit, but you're going to look cool,
for a while.
For a while.
Until your septum is dissolved and you're walking around paranoid. But other than that.
Right. And if you if you need to get stuff done, stuff's going to get done for sure. But, again, the idea here is these gimmicks interfere with the long-term success. Somebody who invests and gets defrauded by a Ponzi scheme is never investing again. Right. And they've lost everything that they've built up. Right. And so, I feel it makes long-term work harder, these attachments to gimmicks that we have. And I think at the end of the day, it comes down to a little bit of insecurity. And that's kind of one of the last things I wanted to talk about is we're afraid of change too, right? And so we want that early proof, right? Before we make the jump into any kind of commitment, right? What am I right on that, or am I wrong on that one?
Well, let's see. Once again, I just go back to this thing about reward and the difference between immediate gratification and delayed gratification.
Right.
Right. So if someone's offering somebody something that says, oh, with not very much effort, you're going to be immediately rewarded.
Right.
Versus you really got to put a lot of effort into this and not get rewarded for quite a long time.
Yeah.
Which one would you like? Right. So boom.
Yeah. I go for the short term all the time.
Right. Yeah. And which is fine in some areas, but in some other areas, the issue becomes not just the focus on is this example of, good. I'm dropping, 12 pounds in the first 2 weeks by taking these supplements. Because there's a larger issue. There are two things. One is, how does this adversely affect health, as opposed to the idea that if we want to be healthy, we need to be at a reasonable weight and reasonably fit. So that's a really critical piece of it, right? And then the second part of it is the ability to maintain it. Because there's a million ways, and we see the advertising for weight loss programs, weight loss supplements, and I'm just using weight loss. It could be anything.
Yeah.
But research shows study after study after study after study. There's just total regression, and people go back to their old habits eventually because they haven't changed behavior with the exception of swallowing something. That's the only behavior that they've changed.
Right. Right. And so when it comes to this stuff, like it's attractive to us, and it's really like you've said to me, I think before, that the best psychologists work for these companies.
Yeah.
Right. And they're just really good at manipulating us. And so it's about kind of an awareness that these gimmicks are here and like why we're going for them. And I guess another thing I like to bring awareness to this year that I've noticed a dramatic uptick of is the wellness influencers that would normally be selling you that crap have taken a heel turn and an about face, and they're now saying don't use cleanses. It takes work. And it's really interesting phenomenon because if you scratch the surface, they're just promoting their gimmick, right? Or the other thing that people have to understand is that their goal isn't to sell you something now, but just build trust and credibility to sell you something later. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't know that, again, from this extrinsic side of things in this new year, when people are talking about this stuff, just you agreeing with that sentiment, liking that thing, engaging with that thing, and then, taking it a step further and becoming a fan, and then taking that a step further and giving them your email, that tends to be more valuable for companies than selling you a product. Period.
Oh, yeah.
And if you don't understand how the data side of things works, you really should, you owe it to yourself to learn about that and understand that, liking a post or amplifying a voice is much more influential from a business standpoint these days than actually buying products. And so, it's something to be aware of and beware of, that during this time of the year, you have these people that are doing this about face. Be careful, right? If they haven't been saying that for all along, then, you know not to trust them,
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if this product didn't work beyond a few weeks, the psychological principle is the same. Is, well, if I don't want to do the work, well, I'll try that product.
Right.
Oh, good. They're promoting a new product.
Right.
Oh, that must be the miracle that I've been looking for.
Right.
And another problem with human beings is we think we're a hell of a lot smarter than we really are.
Right.
Which is, you can't fool me. Here's my money. Because there's so many other psychological processes working that motivate us that most people aren't aware of.
Right.
I mean, we should really have a course, when kids are in grade school, teaching them how their brains really work and educating them. And actually, I just saw something interesting. In New Jersey just passed a law to teach kids to be more critical about online content, et cetera, which is really what we need. And that's what you're referring to is an influencer gets paid for doing what? I don't know. They look pretty.
Yeah.
They look pretty,
and
however they manage to get these followers, and now they get tons of money for promoting products that they're not telling you that they've got a financial stake to be promoting until after the fact.
Right.
Right. When somebody gets caught doing something wrong. Oh, yeah. Right. Oh, by the way. And we listen because we want someone to tell us. I think it was H.L. Mencken who said, nobody's ever gone broke underestimating the intelligence of the American public. Which is a really sad commentary when we think about it.
Man.
Right?
Yeah.
So it is, as you said, it's about educating ourselves just to be a little bit more aware and a little bit more sophisticated. Because when we think we're smart, we overlook becoming smart.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sort of in the same vein, one last kind of component to this that I want to touch on is the idea of pseudo actions, and how basically these companies and these manipulators have realized that if they can replace actual actions with pseudo actions, they can get us kind of addicted longer. So here's a great example. I guess it's more to the point like we don't let ourselves get bored anymore. I guess we'll start with that, right? If I'm bored out of my mind, I'm going to get up and do something. But I don't have to be bored anymore because I can take no energy, no action in my boredom and scroll. And it's a pseudo action. It's giving me the same psychological benefit as if I were doing something, engaging with the world, talking with people. And as a result, I stay in this boredom, like mid-boredom state, and I never get motivated enough to act. And what I found in my journey in the new year and, previously to get off of Reddit, by not having Reddit available to fill that gap, I get super bored and I'm like, I got to get up and do something.
Hello, right.
And I actually take an action.
Right.
And it's interesting, not just from a Reddit standpoint, but if you can put supplements in there, right? It's a pseudo action. I'm doing something, even though I'm not really doing something. You can take food, right? Crappy food, right? I'm nourishing myself, but I'm just eating a cookie, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things that kind of fall into that same place. And the reason, again, I say it, I want your opinion on what I'm saying, of course, but I'm saying it because it's another one of the pitfalls that especially get escalated this time of year. So.
Oh, absolutely. God, there's so many things I'd like to say about this, but I'm going to focus just on that pseudo action piece. It's amazing to think historically that prior to modern technology devices, the invention of the TV, the invention of the radio, people actually must have had something to do and they must have done it. How could that possibly be, right?
Right.
How could they have survived? How did they get through a pandemic?
Right. What would they have done? Right.
Yeah. What would they have done?
Right.
Well, maybe they would have read or,
if you can't sing Imagine as a celebrity and put that on the internet, what would have happened? Right? I don't
exactly. So, this idea that it looks like we're doing something when we're not really doing something. So one of the things that happens with human behavior is habit loops. So habits are things we don't think about. Like, you could be brushing your teeth and thinking about 100 other things, and your nervous system's already got this programmed about where to stick the toothbrush. It's not gonna shove it up your nose. It's gonna brush your teeth, and
right.
So that's very useful. But what happens when we're engaged in lots of habits, and most of our habits may not be that helpful to us, truthfully, and I'll go back to that in a moment, they may not be that helpful, but we're going through them without awareness, or in certain terminology, we're like walking through our lives asleep. We're just doing these things over and over again while our mind is a million other places. And we think wherever that mind is must be really important because those are words in our head, so we should be listening,
right.
As opposed to that's just a piece of brain tissue making words. Nothing very important going on there. We should really be paying attention to what's going on outside. So if we go back to the concept of habits, most of what people learn, they learn pretty accidentally.
Right.
Some habits people may learn by, real focus. Like if you learn to play the piano, that's a habit eventually if you get good enough to do it, that, you had to put, let's go back to effort in the beginning. So to establish habits, we need to initially recognize that we're going to put effort in with minimum return. Maximum effort, minimum return at the beginning of the learning curve. The learning curve is pretty flat. It doesn't mean nothing's happening in our brain and our nervous system, but not yet showing up.
Right.
If we stick with something
Yeah.
over time, and it could be weeks, months, years, right? What eventually happens is decreased effort, increased outcome or performance, right?
Mm-hmm.
The learning curve starts to rise and we
Mm-hmm.
get better at this thing we're doing, whether it's playing the piano or eating healthier food or exercising, whatever the case may be. But we have to get through that initial stage of the willingness to exert the effort when there isn't any immediate apparent rewards. So let's talk about motivation.
Yeah.
Right. So how the heck do we do that if reward drives behavior?
Right.
So the way that we do that, it's something that you and I were chatting before we turned on the mics here about internal, external, intrinsic, extrinsic forces that motivate us.
Yep.
Right. So one of the things is I will hear a lot of people say, and my patients say, I want to do fill in the blank.
Yeah.
So let's go back. I want to lose weight because it's a thing. So, and I'll say, why? Well, I want to be healthier.
Yeah.
That sounds like a pretty good idea. I want to be healthier.
Right. That's what everybody says.
Right. But what I keep doing is I'll just keep drilling down, and the people who are listening to this can write down the thing that they want to change. Right. And then ask themselves why, but keep asking why. Well, why do you want to be healthier? Right. Well, I want to look a little better. Why do you want to look better? Why do you want to be able to move around easier? Why? Right. Until something may rise up like, well, the truth of the matter is I'm getting older. I've got a bunch of grandkids. I'm on high blood pressure medicine. I'm on medication for high cholesterol. I'm pre-diabetic. I'm this. And actually, I'm scared I'm going to die without seeing those kids grow up.
Yeah.
So, what's important to you now?
Right.
Your value is, I want to live long enough to see my grandchildren grow up. Okay. Now, instead of going, I want to lose weight, and, you eat a salad for 2 days, and then you go back to eat the box of cookies.
Yeah.
Every time you're sitting down, if you look at whatever, your food choices and the quantity you're eating, and you go, I want to live long enough to see my grandchildren grow up. I don't want to die young.
Yeah.
Right? Like my parents and my grandparents did.
Right.
Now you got something that's really an intrinsic motivation that matters.
Right.
Not just the external stuff that, let's go back to advertising and marketing and influencers, are giving us, like, I love that stuff. It's like, okay, you take these pills and, oh my God, you look like a god or a goddess. Right. Right.
I see the 4-hour erection pills a lot. I don't know why. I don't know why those get served to me all the time. It's weird.
Right. Exactly. So, we're not going to, those are models. Hello.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
God knows what they did to get to look that way.
Right. Well, we were talking about the Liver King. Did you hear about this dude?
No.
So we were talking about the Liver King last year, and like Mark mentioned him, and then like the week later, so he's this jacked dude, gigantic dude, and he talks about how he just eats elk liver or something stupid like that. He just feeds his kids raw meat and makes them drag tires and stuff.
Right.
And then of course he's using every drug on the planet, right? And like, so it's just that idea of like, I'm an influencer and I did this, in a shortcut, and you can too, and then it's all fake and nonsense, and that's kind of what we've been saying. So it's sort of like Inception, like you have to simplify the idea to make it really stick. When people make these strong commitments, does that do something psychologically that actually can sabotage them or make the process a negative process?
Yes, because if we make a strong commitment without follow through, guess what we are?
What's that?
We're a failure.
Oh,
we failed.
Yeah, we start slapping the labels on it, right?
That's right. We failed again. So to be a failure doesn't feel good.
Right.
Right. So when we don't feel good, if something doesn't feel good, if it's aversive, whether you're an amoeba or a human being, you back away from it,
right, and avoid it,
right? That's exactly right.
And the thing is, resolutions don't work, right? Like statistically, like people will do them and they will work for some
a short
people,
period
right?
of time,
And like I think most people are out by January, but like by June, I think it's something around 10%. And of course, we have short-term memory and short-term attention spans, and we don't see the marketing anymore, which is done by February. And now we're not even thinking about a resolution anymore. Life's taken over, and the old habits are back. And then another year, another resolution, and now we feel like crap because now we're attaching those labels to everything.
Because I blew it, and I'm no good, and I can't follow through on anything, and why bother? And now I feel really crappy.
The bad roommate in your head starts
up. Okay, I think I'll just scroll on the phone and eat all the things that are on the counter, so I don't have to feel this feeling of I'm not okay.
Right. Yeah. I've found that folks that are like setting these goals, especially in a public manner, they're telling themselves a story that is different than the person that they are. And it creates this gap. And that gap is what creates a lot of anxiety and depression and stuff like that. And especially if it comes crashing down and we realize, nope, I'm not that person that I just told myself. And then it ends up being this almost mental health crisis, right? So, and it comes because we're attaching to the goals, right? We're attaching to the outcomes. The outcomes will tell us if we're a success or a failure or what kind of person we actually are, right? And so I don't like resolutions because it ends up being, for most people, that other layer of stress, which it's supposed to be positive. It's supposed to be a time to actually help you achieve something. So let's talk about that attachment and why we just as part of who we are, we just want something to happen even though it's out of our control.
Absolutely. Or even if it is within our control. Because, the thing about attaching to a goal without a plan on how to achieve it.
Right. That's right.
So some fantasy idea of, I'm going to be this person, I'm not, or I can achieve this without effort, or, I can become somebody I've never been, right? And what you said about that gap in psychological terms, we talk about the ego ideal. The ego ideal is our fantasy of who we really are, could be, should be, are supposed to be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And then there's the reality of how we are and how we function every day. So the bigger the gap between the way we really are and the ego ideal, the more actually psychological pain there is. So the unhealthy way we deal with that is either to to criticize ourselves all the time. What's wrong with me? Why can't I be that? Right. Or to use psychological defenses to defend against the reason why we're not that way. Oh, it's his fault.
Right.
Or her fault.
Yeah.
It's certainly not my fault.
Yeah.
Right. The healthy way is to recognize what that gap is. Oh, so I really want to be a person who, fill in the blank again, right? But here I am, and that's where I'd like to be.
Right.
Right? I'll go using my example again. I'd really like to be a kinder person.
Right.
Okay. So rather than defending against why all these things are preventing me from being that way, I can say, what can I do today?
Right.
And tomorrow and maybe the
What's
next
in
day.
my control, right?
What's in my control that will actually gradually and realistically move me in the direction of this person, this behavior, this quality, this action that I would like to be. Understanding, once again, it's slow going. I mentioned habits a while ago. When we have developed what we will refer to as a bad habit, something that's not working productively for us.
Yeah.
So now you have a double whammy. First, you have to exert significant effort to overcome and resist engaging in the, quote, bad habit.
Yeah.
And then we have to exert effort into the practicing of the new, more productive functional habit.
Right.
That's a lot of work in the beginning.
It is a lot of work.
But if we stay with it and we have those intermediate goals by which we realize we're making progress, right? So we say we look at ourselves, maybe we sit down for a minute at the end of the day and go, how'd I do today?
Right.
Right. And we go, oh, you know what? Like that's I said please and thank you, or good morning, or I offered to help somebody, and I may not have done that, a week ago.
Right.
Wow.
That's progress.
Okay, so now I can see some progress. That's rewarding. I'm actually engaged in the actions that are moving me towards this idea of who I would prefer to be in the world in my actions, not just in my fantasies.
So that kind of gets to the heart of the matter here, because I believe that resolutions, they're supposed to be this positive, goal setting, intent, representation of a drive that you have. We can and should set goals, but when we set these dramatic resolutions, especially because of all the extrinsic factors and the misplaced intrinsic factors, we're destined to fail, which then means that we're destined to fail in the future in our other efforts. So I believe that there's a better strategy, and I call it a New Year's vision. And the New Year's vision is a little bit different because it is a dreamy kind of goal, but the thing that makes it more tangible is that there are 5 things that must be done on a consistent basis to make that vision real. So it's, what is it that I want to do, be, accomplish, and what are the 5 things that I need to do to make that real? Those 5 things done every single day, week, whatever it is, once they're done consistently, objective things that I can measure, tangible things, if I do those things, then that vision will be true. And I think that's a better approach to this. So let me use an example. So if I come at it and say I want to lose weight, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you say something like, I want to lose 15 pounds over the next year, which is a very reasonable thing. We're not saying I want to lose 15 pounds in 3 days, like the supplement says I can, right? So what
and
5
then put back 20 pounds.
And put back 20 pounds 4 days later.
Right.
What 5 things need to be true for this vision to be true? And so if I can break that down into 5 measurable things, I would say something like, I need to consume less calories than my body needs every day. I need the food that I eat to be more nutrient dense. I need to reduce high calorie foods like snacks and treats to rare. I need to exercise regularly. I need to stay hydrated, drinking low to no calorie drinks. Those are 5 tangible things that I can do on a daily basis. I can measure it literally every time I go to eat something. Am I doing those things? And if I'm doing those things, then you better believe it, by next year, I will be 15 pounds lighter. So again, it's an opportunity for us to create a new system that utilizes the knowledge of our human psychology, our inability to plan long-term and stick to something long-term because of all the stuff that we talked about, but then we can one at a time do those things. As you said, like you give an example of I want to be a better person, right? And so then what are the 5 things that I need to do to be a better person on a regular basis?
Specified. What would make you a better person? Once again, like I said, kindness or generosity or patience or whatever. But, the thing that you mentioned is really great because, yes, if you have these 5 things, what I would add to that is remember the learning curve in the beginning.
Yeah.
Maximum effort, minimum results.
Yeah.
So it takes effort to do each of those things. So avoid the resolution that I'm going to do all 5 of these every day, because that's just setting up failure. We don't work that way.
Right.
But if what we are understanding is I'm going to, over the next several months, incorporate these 5 things into my life. And so instead of, as I see people do all the time as well, I did 2 of them, but I didn't do 3 of them. Example.
Yeah.
I teach people meditation.
Yeah.
So what happens is, people come in and go, I was like, God, I only meditated 3 times this week. I really blew it. And I'm going,
the opposite point of meditation.
What are you talking about? You meditated 3 times this week. That's 3 times more than you used to.
Yeah.
Right. So if on any given day you're hydrating without high sugar drinks, or you're choosing a more nutritive food, you look at that and say, oh yeah, today I did that today. I may have only done it at 1 meal, but I did it today. Well, okay, I'm going to write that down. Remember, we want to be measurable and intermediate goals, right? So Well, when I compare myself to my actions to 2 weeks ago, I'm like doing these 5 things 20% more than I did a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
Right? Oh.
And that's important.
And that's important. So I see how this works.
Mm-hmm.
It's a gradual increase without negative judgment because I'm not perfect.
Right.
I'm actually doing what B.F. Skinner learned with rats in a lab pushing bars for pellets.
Right.
That there is a learning curve.
Yeah.
Actually, it preceded him, but I'll just use that. There were other people talking about learning curve, but I won't get into the history of psychology. And we see this is how it actually works. This is how we work as human beings. Mm-hmm. And wow, 2 months out, at the end of February, when I look back at the beginning of January, at my notes about what I did, I'm really making progress. And darn if when I get on the scale,
look at me go.
if I'm not a couple of pounds lighter now,
and
I feel better,
right,
psychologically and physically, because I'm now making progress. Remember, because over time, effort decreases, results, outcome increase.
So we set a goal, and then we have these 5 things that if we do, then they equal that goal, right?
Yeah.
But then we proceed without attachment to say that I'm going to do these 5 things. Mm-hmm. But we know that if we don't do them, it's not going to produce the result that we want. So we have to say, all right, let's see what happens. A curiosity instead of an attachment, right, Doc?
Beautiful.
We want to make sure that when we do this, we are not attached to the result. I'm going to do all 5 of these things every single time I eat, but instead we're saying these are the 5 things that need to be true to make my reality, my dream, my vision true. And so as long as I do those, then that equals that. It's just a straight math formula. Then we say, so what's going to happen? And we're going to go throughout our day and we're going to try and we're going to have our best intentions. And if we don't, we can't attach to the idea that, it's got to be one way. We have to just kind of see what happens. And we have to then understand that if we don't attach the labels, we're successes or failures, and we can start again. And that's why, especially when we are dealing with nutrition, it's awesome because you have basically infinite, but it's really 6 times a day is what most people are kind of chomping on food. You have 6 opportunities every day to try it again,
Exactly.
or more. So
yeah, no, wow, you brought up such good stuff there, Neal. So this goes back to, when you mentioned in the introduction, I do mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. So what is that about? So, we're very used to Western psychology. You know? I mentioned Skinner, and all the big names and all those kind of stuff. But guess what? There's a whole other rest of the world, and they have a psychological model that's quite different from ours. So in that case, what we look at are the things that you just mentioned. Yep. So it's attachment. So what does that mean? We get attached to something that's going to happen, one form of attachment, to the future.
Right.
And we're getting so attached to that we lose our present attention to the action that's required in the present to get there. Right. So, if we're taking a long walk, it's the difference between thinking about, well, at the end of the walk, I'm going to get to this place versus, I'm going to actually experience every step I take and hear, see, smell, taste, feel what's going on in my body and around me in the here and now. So how does that apply to what you've said? It applies to, I'm not going to think about this goal at the end of the year. In this present moment, I'm going to do this thing of the 5 things, or 2 of them, or 4 or 5, or whatever.
Yep.
Here and now. And then, as you mentioned, curiosity, which is another piece of Eastern psychology, which is instead of, I know what's going to happen, we don't have a clue about what's going to happen. So if I engage in these actions and choices, I'm curious now.
Right.
I'm now curious about what's going to happen. So I'm not attached and I'm, wrapped up with the possibility of failure, or I've got a big ego and
you're not going to judge yourself, right?
Yeah, exactly. Now I'm just, I wonder what happens if I set this vision, if I do these 5 things, if I have these intermediate goals, I'm just really going to be curious to see what happens.
Right.
So it's a very different mental attitude to approach our lives with curiosity rather than, as so many people say, I know how it's, I know how it's going to happen.
Right.
You have no idea how it's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So those are really, really critical elements. So we release ourselves from attachment, which is just a way of thinking, and we generate the quality of curiosity, which is, once again, one of those things that we can practice.
Right. And as I said at the outset, like, this is a mindfulness episode. So we're talking about resolutions and nutrition and supplements and all of this other stuff. And it's really more for me about understanding the psychology and understanding the mental well-being aspect. And it shows again that with our strategy for true holistic care, the interconnectedness and the interdependence of our nutrition and our physical fitness and our mental well-being and a supplement strategy and all of those components for our actual long-term success. I've got this theory. So there's a lock, right? Mm-hmm. That we all have to learn the combination to, right? It can't be picked. You can't use a shortcut. Right? It's the lock that is on the gate between stagnation and success. Okay? It's a 3-number combination, and you dial it not to a specific number, but a fact about the human condition. There are 3 things, and once you understand what they are, that lock opens up for you. And they're in my terms, so they're not official. This isn't some like a high-level thinking thing. It's very lowbrow like I am, right? So 1, we suck at math. We can't calculate risk objectively. So if we can dial that first piece in and understand that we just aren't good at that, right? Like, I'd never take a COVID vaccine because of side effects, but I'm going to use this turmeric instead that has this hepatotoxicity risk that's far more prevalent than any side effects from COVID, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the first one. We just suck at calculating that risk. The second dial there, the second little number, is that we don't think long term. We just can't do that, right? I'm not going to stop smoking because it's going to cause lung disease 40 years from now. I'm going to stop smoking because it's $40 a pack right now, right? We have to focus on those short-term emergencies and distractions because our human brains are wired for it because they're addictive, those short-term little distractions. And then the third number, we're afraid to change, even if it's beneficial, because we need proof, right? We need success and we need it early. So we know that our efforts are going to be fruitful because we are really kind of nervous and afraid of change. And so write those 3 things down. And your best self, in my eyes, is on the other side of this gate, and that lock is keeping you in place. And those things, those mind hacks that you'd have to do to understand how humans behave and how we behave individually for yourself is the secret. Engaging in those 3 points is going to break that lock wide open for you.
The more we can simplify things to understand them, and that they are accurate,
right,
in the way that we function day to day, process information, etc. If we can just get some of the basic elements of how our brains operate and influence us,
yeah,
we are our brains are blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Anyway, but I'll use the common parlance here.
Right.
And then it stops becoming some mystery.
Right.
It stops, quote, working against us, meaning that we're not engaging in the actions that we desire. And we have a much higher probability then of being able to utilize what are amazing resources.
Right.
Amazing resources. I look around the world every day and I think, here's the human brain. Human brain has created weapons that can destroy the entire planet in a heartbeat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the human brain has created some of the most amazing positive consequences to change humanity and the planet for the better.
Right.
It's a choice. How do we do it at the individual level? How do we do it at the communal level? How do we do it at the national level? How do we do it at the global level? Right? This is a choice. Let us use what we know to change the way we are, for the better to achieve the goals we would like.
Right.
Right. And by the way, we've been talking about, New Year's resolutions and 1 year out. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? Mm-hmm. This can be for longer than 1 year.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. We can
keep
do
it
this going
longer term, right? And so we can do this, and we can do this effectively if we are, as you said about these 3 elements of the combination, aware and realistic about what interferes with it and how to use that to unlock that lock,
right,
to move into the world of action, because we can sit and think and think and think and think and go, I know.
Yeah.
But the moment we take an action, change occurs.
Being healthy is a long-term game, right? It requires discipline. And we've said before, there's no gimmick that will work, that will be successful for you. You have to do the work, and it's boring. And so in order to make that boring a little bit more obtainable, hack your psychology, if you want to use those terms, it has to get broken up. So use a vision with the 5 things that need to be true in order to accomplish these goals, instead of these silly, declarations and resolutions that we do this time of the year. So again, what is my vision? What do I want to be true? And what are the 5 things that are tangible and can be objectively measured that if I do, will make that vision true? That's what you should do.
And those are actions, right?
Actions.
Exactly. And you said, be disciplined. So everybody kind of usually has a bad reaction to that concept. That doesn't sound like much fun.
No, that doesn't sound like
but it's the same thing of being, basically it's being a disciple. It's following a teacher. And we can be our own teachers, amazingly enough, and we can follow the teachings that we set out for ourselves, as you just said, as in these 5 things, right? And, as my meditation teachers will always jokingly say, there's a reason we call it a practice.
Right, right.
Well, there's a reason we call it a practice, because whatever we practice, we get better at, whether we want to or not.
Right.
If we practice things that are not useful or helpful, we will get better at them.
That's
if we
right.
practice things that are useful and helpful, we get better at them. If we practice, we've been talking about establishing the vision or goals, knowing what the intermediaries are, how we can recognize them, see the little rewards instead of that big reward, right? Be curious about how it's all going to unfold and we're going to get there and what's going to happen at the end. We can sustain, going back to what we were talking about, our motivation. That is the willingness to put forth the effort on a regular basis, especially at the beginning when there's less outcome, to get to the point where there's less effort and greater outcome.
Let's now talk about my personal vision so you guys can know what I'm up to this year. So, Dr. Dresdale, I was saying, I think on a previous episode, that around Halloween, I used to say December, but around Halloween, my diet turns into Buddy the Elf. My 4 major food groups are chocolate chip cookies, cookie platters, and bourbon.
You were stealing the candy from your kids after they went out trick-or-treating.
There's no candy left. They got to go to bed sometime. Right. And I'm the authoritarian in the house. So I'm like, you're going to bed and I'm eating your candy.
Right.
The girls try to hide their candy in the room. And I'm like, there's dogs. You can't do that, right? So,
and then there's you.
And me. So I go off the rails, but like it wasn't as bad as last season. So I can see that I'm making incremental gains here, right?
Sweet.
And so and for me, as you were talking about with other patients, like as long as it's not physically there, then I'm okay. If it's in front of me, I have no control or willpower. It just doesn't work for me. So the nice thing from my perspective is that my plan for 2023 is to just not work so hard to be so gluttonous. I just have to stop.
Well, okay, now I want you to reverse that. What's the positive? What's the mirror image of gluttony? What is the positive?
Not gluttony. I'm a math guy. I'm sorry.
Ungluttony.
1 over gluttony.
I want to be ungluttonous.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I can just like literally do nothing and then I'll be fine because like I had to like I'm going to shove this down my throat at this point because I just have to. Right. So my New Year's vision, just so you can see how I kind of do these things is not to say I want to do XYZ with my weight. I actually am just saying I want to continue the incremental health and wellness gains I've made.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my vision. If I can look back 1 year from now and say, did I do that? That would be a success in my book, right? So in order to do that, there's 5 things that I have to do on a regular basis. So my diet has to be on track, right? So what I normally say to myself is on a daily basis, minimize my simple carbs and strive to eat non-hyper processed whole foods with every meal and every snack. So that's one tangible thing I can easily measure.
That's a category change.
Easily,
that's a
right?
good one.
That's a good one, right? 2, like regular exercise, not just the 3 days a week that I go for strength training, but incorporating an additional 3 days of physical activity, maybe running as I was doing, but just doing something, getting on the treadmill and just doing an additional 3 days. I wanted to, poor Mark isn't here. I wanted to actually implement, and I have been, a stretching routine. I do 15 minutes of daily deliberate stretching using actual poses, not just the kind of silly stuff you do in gym class, right? I've been doing 5-minute twice daily meditation. So once in the morning, once at night, boom, boom, and I get that done. And then the last one is a reduction in Reddit time, or social media time, I should say, to no more than 60 minutes of total browsing time daily. And I'm doing something where I put my phone physically in another spot in the house, and that has been kind of changing because, again, I'm not getting into those pseudo actions.
Or in another state.
In another state would be fantastic. A state of liquid would be awesome if I could just melt the stupid thing. So my 5 things that need to be true. 1 is nutritional, 2 is physical fitness, and 2 is mental well-being. And so it shows my commitment to the wellness pyramid itself and how we can potentially use these components to make ourselves healthier. So I don't know, do you set goals for yourself or visions, or are you just on the wagon?
The word I use for myself is challenges, because I just kind of I respond better to that concept.
Yeah.
And so what I'll do is I will set a challenge that then serves as the motivator for me to do those things that ultimately will enable me to succeed at the challenge.
Right.
Example, my personal life. My wife and I really like to do active travel. That means
like insane active travel.
Yeah,
people.
insane.
Like another episode. Just for
right,
that.
exactly.
Like, it's crazy.
So I'm a little older at this point, and I've stopped doing a lot of the high altitude stuff. But at lower altitudes, it still means a lot of hiking and so forth and so on. So when I go do this, that's a challenge. We plan a trip. I want to go there. I want to be able to successfully do that physically, right? And that's very motivating for me.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't want to be that guy.
Right.
When I get there, it's like, oh, look at him.
Oh, he's passed out.
Right.
He can't.
Look at that. Right.
Yeah.
So what that does is, because I know, once again, delayed gratification, but I can look forward to this possibility. I don't know what's actually going to happen. I'm curious how it's going to happen and unfold, but I can look forward to it. Then that motivates me to keep doing all of the things that I have done and I add to as healthy habits that keep me in a state of mind and body to be able to take on that challenge and hopefully successfully complete it.
Right. So it's the same structure as the vision that I'm laying out, just differently customized for you.
Precisely.
Because you found what it is.
That works for me.
At least we're not talking smack. We're actually practicing what we preach here. So.
Amen. You got to walk the walk.
So let's do a little recap here. So first and foremost, don't give in to that marketing pressure that's applied quite liberally this time of year. It's fine to want to start a program or to get back on your regularly scheduled program like me. And there's a number of ways to do so. But you won't have lasting change with any quick fix, simple solution, magic pill, magic shake, magic diet, or new fad thingy, right? 2, resolutions, they really don't work. And oftentimes the only lasting impact of a resolution made this time of year is anxiety or a sense of failure, which leads to avoidance behaviors. So we don't want to stand in our way of our own success. So we have to understand what these traps are, these psychological traps that the bad roommate in our head puts in there, right? And so we want less attachment, we want more acceptance, and we want to set, instead of a resolution, a New Year's vision, a plan of what needs to be true to reach the dreams that we want to accomplish, health, wellness, or otherwise. A vision really helps us unlock, as we talked about with the combination, our potential. And finally, lasting change is achievable and we can always improve, but let's just not change for change's sake. I read this tweet, Dr. Dresdale, I know you're going to love this one, right? And this person said, what if instead of trying to create a brand new you just accept yourself, appreciate yourself, go easy on yourself, and show yourself unconditional positive regard, right?
No judgment.
No judgment. It's an important point, and we want you to flip your mindset upside down here. And when you do, you can be your healthiest. Today is a great day, not for a new you, but for a new pattern. Accept who you are, but then challenge your routines, your consumption, your filters, your inputs, all of that stuff. That does it for this week's podcast episode. Take a few minutes, give us a 5-star review, and share the podcast on your social feeds. Visit wellnessupsidedown.com for all things podcast. And remember, being our healthiest starts with being honest about ourselves and the health and wellness industry, then blazing a new path, marching forward one step at a time. I'm Dr. Neal Smoller, and I've got your back. Thanks for joining me. And then all of a sudden they put that needle in my scalp and they put the vibrations on, and it is the craziest sensation I've ever felt in my entire life. That pain feels like they are driving a 10-inch nail through your skull into the other side of your face.